It was 2016, and I was in India in an ashram completing yoga teacher training. The training was physically and emotionally intense for all of us. It was not unusual to see people crying at the dinner table or after a yoga class. There were nearly 20 of us from nearly 20 different countries, and there was one topic that was at the root of every person's struggle. So, what were a bunch of flexible, good-natured yogis crying about? Love. People were breaking down about not feeling loved by their mother, father, sister, brother, best friend, etc. And in the middle of the night, I woke up thinking, why don't we teach people how to love? We teach so many subjects in school, from math, science, history, languages, literature, and arguably the thing that I think matters most is noticeably absent: love. So for the past 5 years, I've been teaching a class I designed called How to Love, the Art and Science of Love and Intimacy. As Richard Bach says, we teach what we need to learn, and for me, this couldn't be more true. I grew up in neglectful, abusive, and dysfunctional homes. My biological father was an abusive alcoholic, and at a young age, I witnessed and experienced multiple acts of domestic violence. Despite all of this, my dad had custody of us, and my mom was in and out of my life. And then we were in foster care at one point, and then back with dad. And then dad remarried, and his new wife was also physically and emotionally abusive. Eventually, they divorced, and things got worse. I asked my ex-stepmom to step up, and thankfully she did. She adopted us with her new husband. I was 14, and my definition of love was unreliable, confusing, and scary. My desire for love and fear of harm was so strong in my childhood that I did all sorts of things to try and cope, mostly harmful stuff. I sought the attention of older boys. I smoked and drank at a young age. I tried to run away from home twice. I contemplated suicide. But I also loved school. I felt seen and cared for by my teachers. I had warm and supportive friends. And then I made this hard turn from bad girl to good girl, do-gooder girl, churchy girl, all in the hopes that if I could show how good I was, how perfect I was, that maybe I could avoid harm and be loved. I never did figure out how to be perfect, as in flawless in my beauty or my behavior. In fact, it seemed to me that once I got close to these elusive standards of perfection, the rules changed. Even when I reached milestones that any perfectionist would have been elated over, like getting my PhD in psychology, the fanfare was short-lived and I wasn't loved more or differently. I still haven't given up on being perfect, but my definition of perfect has changed. According to the late brilliant Bell Hooks, perfect does not mean flawless or without error. Perfect means a willingness to revise or a willingness to perfect. In short, being perfect is willing to change, to listen, to reflect, and do something differently the next time. So when it comes to love, being perfect, as Bell Hooks describes it, is essential. This is a definition of perfect that I could succeed at. And in fact, if I or we want to stop the cycles of suffering that we've been caught in, then being perfect, as she describes it, is essential. But remember, I'm not talking about perfect love. I'm talking about being able to revise how we love. So before I talk about how to perfectly love, it's helpful to get clear about what love is and what love is not. One of my favorite definitions of love also comes from Bell Hooks. She says that to truly love, we must be willing to mix various ingredients: care and affection, commitment and respect, recognition and trust, as well as honest and open communication. She confirms what relationship experts have been saying for years: love is an action. She also pushes up against our definitions of love by saying love and abuse cannot coexist. Love, or abuse and neglect, by definition, are the opposites of love and care. So when I held my experience of love up against these definitions, it was clear my upbringing was not loving. Yes, I was fed, clothed, and sheltered, but so much more was missing. I was raised, but I was not loved. I wanted to understand the cycle of lovelessness better. My quest for love and healing brought me to the teachings of the late Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh. From him, not only did I learn to sit with my difficult emotions in meditation, but I was also struck by the cycles of suffering that we are continually caught in. My parents' suffering and theirs and so on was passed down to me. My parents all did the best they could with the tools they have. But now I have different tools, and while it is not my fault that I inherited this suffering, it is an opportunity for me to intervene, heal, and avoid passing it on to my kids or others. Consider this. We have the know-how to solve all the world's problems, from poverty to climate change to gun violence to racism, but the problems don't get fixed. Why? I think what's missing is love. Perfect love is about changing. We need to stop the cycles of suffering, but how? On my own journey of love, I have identified 4 practices that seem most noticeably absent from our individual and collective toolkits. These are practices I teach in the love class, and they start with ourselves and move outward. Number 1, feel and validate your feelings. Most of us don't have language for how we feel or know what to do with ourselves when we feel. Those of us who grew up in unloving households were ignored, shamed, blamed, punished, or banished for feeling pain. In my household, if I cried, I was told to shut up or I'll give you something to cry about. But I already had something to cry about. The adults in my household couldn't tolerate my negative emotions, and sometimes they seemed to struggle with my positive ones. When only some feelings are allowed to be felt as kids, then as adults, we will struggle to feel and validate the full range of our emotional experience. So why is it important to feel our feelings? Because stuck feelings keep us stuck. And the pain doesn't magically go away. We'll find other ways to cope or discharge it onto others. That is usually maladaptive and creates more suffering. However, there are things we can do right now to begin the process of feeling and validating our own emotional experience. And when we do this, we get so much better at being able to see, hear, and validate the emotional experience of others. So, the next time you're having a strong feeling, you can try this practice. If you want, you can join with me. Breathing in, I am aware I am feeling nervous. Breathing out, I hold my nervousness with compassion. It is normal to feel this way. Or if you're not sure what you're feeling, breathing in, I think I feel uncomfortable or uneasy. Breathing out, I hold my discomfort with kindness. Let the feelings wash over you. You will survive them. Number 2, be willing to take care of your inner children. Many of us are walking around with internal wounds that can't be easily seen. This is what Thich Nhat Hanh calls our inner children, our wounded children, and they're younger versions of ourselves that did not receive the love we needed. For me, I have several, ranging in ages from 2 to 3 all the way through my young adult years. Once in a therapy session, I had this visual of myself with the giant hole in the middle of my chest where my heart should be. I could see my parents, and they all had holes in their chests too. Later, I saw my adult self and my teenage self take the hands of my younger selves and lead the way forward. We no longer had holes in our chest. Instead, we were walking together, whole. Once we begin to identify our inner children, we can show them love and take care of them. I know it doesn't sound fun to conjure up the wounded children within you, but it doesn't have to be all pain. We can water the seeds of joy, play, and kindness alongside taking care of the wounded children within us. For example, in my childhood, I didn't get to play much. So now when my kids are giggling and playing on the floor together, I invite my inner child to join along. As a mother, I enjoy their play, but little me also heals by participating in some of this long-denied playfulness. To access your inner child, try this. Sit down and write a letter to your adult self as your inner child. If you're able, use your non-dominant hand to express your hurts, the hard times, and the times you needed love and support. As your adult self, write back using your dominant hand. Respond to them as the best loving parent you could possibly imagine, but maybe didn't have. Acknowledge and validate the feelings of that little you. Let them know that you're here now and you can take care of them. 3, be willing to practice self-love and self-care. We cannot expect to uplift, support, and perfectly love others if we are not willing to offer ourselves the same level of generosity. According to Sonia Renee Taylor, radical self-love is our inherent state of being worthy and enough. As babies, we weren't born thinking we were wrong or bad or not enough. No, we learned this from our society, our communities, and sometimes even our families. So to radically love, Sonia teaches us we need to remove toxicity from our lives and befriend ourselves. We need to enjoy these bodies and practice compassion. Radical self-love is so much easier if we take excellent care of ourselves. We need to move self-care out of the luxury box we've put it in and prioritize it in the same way that we prioritize, I hope, other aspects of daily living, like brushing our teeth. Self-care is not a luxury, but it is a practice. So try this. First, when you're looking at your daily calendar, schedule in your self-care just like you schedule in everything else, and then hold that time sacred, because it is. And then since so many of us struggle with loving these bodies, maybe try moving your body in a way you liked as a kid. Love to hula hoop or jump rope, like to dance or swim? Give it to yourself. This is the costume you rented out for this lifetime. We can spend our entire lives picking it apart, or we can love it, take care of it, and enjoy it. Finally, 4, be willing to live by a love ethic. If we want to practice perfect love, we actually need to be willing to love and extend that outwards. Bell Hooks calls this a love ethic. When we live by a love ethic, we make intentional choices to align our lives based on love, practice it with those closest to us, and extend it outward to those we will never meet. Remember, perfect love is not without error, mistakes, or flaws. Perfect love assumes you'll make mistakes, but that you're willing to repair, revise, take responsibility, and try something else instead. Okay, so I know this sounds ambitious, but it is doable. For example, after a long day, if I feel stressed and I yell at my kids, I can immediately go and repair this unloving act with them as soon as possible. And if this behavior becomes a trend, I need to bolster my self-care and ask for help so that we all suffer less. Perhaps you can see how this plays on my other 3 points. 1, feel your feelings. 2, take care of your inner children. 3, practice self-love and self-care. If I practice these tools, then the chances of me yelling are slimmer, and the generational baggage that I carry lightens. So the next time my kids annoy me, and they will, it will serve less as a release valve for me to let off a day's worth or a lifetime's worth of steam. And if I make a mistake, and God knows I will, I get to perfect and try again. This is one way I stop generational suffering in my family. Moving beyond our inner circle of family, friends, acquaintances, living by a love ethic means we place love as our essential value, and we align everything to reflect our commitment to love instead of our allegiance to power. Imagine a world in which businesses, governments, organizations, and countries design their policies and practices based on perfect love instead of power and profit. That would mean they are willing to examine whether their actions cause or contribute to other people's suffering, and if they do, they'll revise, repair, and try something else that's more loving instead. A society that lives by a love ethic would do any number of the following things, though this list is certainly not exhaustive. We would provide basic needs and human rights to all people, because without them, we will endlessly suffer. We would pay our care workers and our teachers dramatically more money because not only do they provide us love, but they teach so many of us how to love. We would make sure parents have at least a year of paid time off to do the work of loving a new baby or a newly adopted or fostered child. We would take all necessary actions to repair the generational suffering we've created for Black and Indigenous people, and we'd show them with our actions that not only do their lives matter, but that they are loved. We'd say we don't condone violence, and we'd mean it. And we'd find new ways to stop violence that actually lead to healing and not more wounding. Especially, we'd stop wounding our precious children all over the world. We'd stop harming the planet and protect her instead. Businesses and governments take the climate pledge, for example, to reduce carbon emissions. Why not a love pledge to reduce the suffering for all, the earth included? Of course, this would mean we have to chart a new path forward, for one that does not perpetuate suffering, but liberates us from it. A society that lives by a love ethic would create loved children and loved adults, not wounded ones. We're not there yet. We don't even know yet what it could look like if our collective hearts were whole and healed. It's never been done. But I can tell you, it will be so beautiful. So where do we start? Try this. Listen with compassion to another person's suffering, and if you are the cause or contributor to it, breathe and refrain from speaking or acting out of anger. Ask what was needed instead. Commit to responding with love. Resolve all conflicts, no matter how small, as in take responsibility for your actions without blaming other people for your unskillfulness, regardless of who started it first. Okay. So I know this might sound ambitious, this love thing. Some of you might be thinking, this is weak and mushy and woo-woo. No. On the contrary, perfect love is the harder practice. It is easier, mindless even, to continue to live a life driven by ego and fear. It takes way more courage for me to love myself and to love you. It takes a commitment and courage to practice love in such a way that then, if we were just unconsciously or consciously repeating the cycles of suffering we've been caught in. We have the intelligence to solve the world's problems, but love is missing. I used to think I needed to be perfect to be loved, but now I want to perfectly love. I can't do it alone. I need you to love your neighbor. Perhaps harder, I need you to love yourself. We can change this world. We can change ourselves. We can love, maybe not flawlessly, but perfectly. Join me.